Coming up, NASA engineer Aaron Yazzie has been inducted into Stanford University's Multicultural Hall of Fame. Abstract art is a family tradition for a Sicangu woman who is one of this year's MacArthur Fellows. And the 40th annual Elders and Youth Conference hits Anchorage, Alaska. We have those interviews, plus headlines ahead on the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
The ICT Newscast is sponsored by the Indian Land Tenure Foundation, a nonprofit organization serving American Indian nations and people in the recovery and control of their rightful homelands. On the web at iltf.org.
Support for the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez comes from the Arizona PBS studios in Phoenix at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
Amirawa Hopa, thank you for joining us. I am Aaliyah Chavez. We start today on the Navajo Nation, where leaders are working to change tribal law in order to recognize gay marriage. The Washington Post reported this week about a debate within the tribal nation that would repeal a ban on same-sex marriages enacted in 2005. The change would allow couples to have more rights involving property or visiting rights at hospitals. The issue is complicated by Christianity, where some Navajos maintain conservative definitions of gender roles. The Post interviewed Indigenous scholars who said a shift would honor Navajo tradition, which recognized multiple genders before the Europeans arrived. Same-sex marriage is legal in all 50 states, but the Navajo Nation sets its own laws for its citizens. Only about 10 of 574 federally recognized tribes still explicitly ban same-sex marriage. Roughly 50 allow or accept gay unions, including the Cherokee Nation, which is the nation's second largest tribe. Most tribes have no specific laws on the topic. Well, recently announced federal funding is set to build a new language resource center. The University of Alaska, the University of Hawaii, and Le Cordere Ojibwe University have been awarded $6 million in grants by the U.S. Department of Education. The consortium of universities will work together to implement the project called Connecting Generations. It will provide resources and best practices to support distance learning, as well as create teacher learning programs for immersion ranging from pre-K all the way to PhD. Those involved say this work is needed because many of the original languages of the Americas are in dangerous situations. On the Northern Plains, a pair of moccasins is symbolically walking the road of truth and reconciliation. An unknown native boy wore them more than 100 years ago when he was shipped off to boarding school in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. The beautiful beaded shoes were taken from him and eventually ended up in private hands, displayed for decades in a glass case until last month. Along with the remains of two boys who died at the school, the shoes were returned to the Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate. They are the symbol of everything that happened at the Carlisle School and the boarding school era, Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate historian Tamara St. John told ICT. Well, the International Olympic Committee voted last week to include lacrosse in the 2028 Summer Olympics, and it's welcome news for a popular Indigenous team. The event will be the 6th time lacrosse has been included in the Olympics, but the first time as a medal sport since 1908. In Haudenosaunee culture, lacrosse is a medicine game and highly valued for its celebration of health, strength, and courage. Originally, lacrosse games required wooden sticks and small deer hide wrapped balls. The fields were borderless and games could last days on end. In 1983, players from the Six Nations formed their own all-star lacrosse team, now called the Haudenosaunee Nationals. They are the only Indigenous nation authorized to play a sport internationally. Team officials say they are already preparing to represent Indigenous peoples on the world stage and are hoping to compete in the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles. We head now to Guatemala, where Indigenous-led protests continue over the outcome of an election. The resignation of Cabinet Minister Napoleon Barrientos is just the latest fallout after a shooting at a protest last week killed one person. It comes as Guatemala's current president, Alejandro Giammattei, is attempting to overturn the victory of President-elect Bernardo Arevalo. The protests are mainly led by Indigenous people and farm workers who see the challenge to the election as a breach of the people's will, and because of this have blocked traffic for days and protest. The president-elect was considered a long-shot candidate running on a strong anti-corruption platform. Since the beginning of October, it is believed as many as 140 roadways have been blocked and thousands of people have flooded the streets of the capital, Guatemala City. Well, what does a farmer look like? For the Ho-Chunk people of Nebraska, there is a new answer. Ho-Chunk Farms is a tribal-owned farming company that is changing the face of agriculture. Over the past 5 years, 3 Nebraska tribes have been buying farmland and adding to its portfolio of crops. Ho-Chunk Farms now farms 6,500 acres. Almost all of it is available on tribally owned land and allotment land. One farm manager, Trey Blackhawk, says acquiring more farmland is a path toward food sovereignty, which is a way for the tribe to feed itself without relying on outside sources. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Since 1995, Stanford University has honored its distinguished alumni through its Multicultural Hall of Fame. This year, Navajo citizen Aaron Yazzie was selected for the award. The NASA engineer graduated from the university in 2008 and has since gone on to not only send objects to other planets, but to inspire leagues of young people. I sat down with Aaron last week to learn more about his journey. Here's this interview.
Yeah, so I've been working at NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory as a mechanical engineer and then now a systems engineer for the past 15 years. And I've been able to serve on roles on some predominant Mars missions while I've been there. So I worked on the Curiosity rover that landed in Mars in 2012. I was able to work on the InSight lander, which landed on Mars in 2018. I worked on the Perseverance rover. I was the lead engineer that built the drill bits for that rover that's currently on Mars, gathering samples from Mars that we hope to bring back to Earth to be able to study it and look for signs of ancient microbial life on Mars. And so currently I'm working Mars Sample Return, the mission that is working to bring those samples back. So those are the highlights of my career, which are sort of the flagship missions that NASA has been working on in the recent past. The drill bits have been really successful. It's been one of the most thrilling things is to be able to see us gather these samples one by one, the parts that I built, the drill bits, doing their job successfully. We have currently gathered about 19 samples on Mars, and we're gonna keep gathering more until we can grab up to about 42 sample tubes, and then we're working to bring 30 of them back. So yeah, it's been really fun seeing, especially like the images when they come back, like seeing something that I once held in my hands, like a picture coming back from Mars. It's really cool.
Here at Stanford, other Indigenous alumni have also made significant contributions in this field. Last year, Wailaki astronaut Nicole Mann became the first ever Native American woman in space. She lived aboard the flying laboratory called the International Space Station and even completed a spacewalk.
Yeah, I was so thrilled to learn about Nicole Mann and her historic mission to the ISS. And especially because she's a Native woman, and that's something that I feel like needs to be shared more. Like when I'm working at NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, a majority of the natives that are working there are women engineers, and so it's really cool to see them represented in that way. I think it's a really big step forward, not only for our Indigenous community, but also women in STEM.
Aaron also reflected on what being inducted into the Multicultural Hall of Fame means to him.
I think it is really touching and meaningful for me to be chosen for this award. When I was here at Stanford, I didn't see myself getting to the point where I'd be somebody that would receive a plaque that would go onto that wall. I couldn't even really see it. Like, it was uncertain if I thought I would be able to graduate, because I came from a very small town from a small public high school, which did a great job of giving me my basic education. But coming here was a whole new ball game of like a different level of learning, a fast-paced learning with a bunch of brilliant people around you, and so I had a lot to do to catch up. And it didn't feel while I was here that I was thriving, that I was the person that was going to be able to like go far. And it was a bunch of little things that helped boost my confidence, like being a leader in ACES, the Stanford ACES club, going to get internships. I had an internship at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center while I was at Stanford, and another one at NASA Glenn Research Center. So having these NASA internships while I was a student made me understand, like, wow, I'm existing at NASA. I'm doing the work being asked of me, and it's not too difficult for me. And not only that, but I think I'm actually good at it. And so that's what really like boosted my confidence. I came back and every year just got better and better as a student. By the time I graduated, I even dared to attempt to apply to a NASA position, and I got it. And so that, like, looking back and being reflective of like where I was then and like now receiving this award, it feels like unreal, and I keep trying to say like I don't deserve this, but also I can also reflect and be honest and see that I put in a lot of work, and I'm very happy that I was able to get this award. See, I'm hoping that students who maybe were like the kind of student that I was, people who come from a small community, come from a community where not a lot of people are on the path that you're currently on, can feel supported and know that other people have not only have gone through this before them, but also there's people, their peers, that are going alongside with them. And I always say too that just also reflect on all the people that are watching you as you go along your journey. Like, they see you as a role model, and understanding that like the youth are looking up to you is a really big motivation tool. It was a big motivation for me. And so don't be discouraged about the big dreams that seem unattainable. Like, I always encourage, just like I said, I never imagined that I would end up at NASA, or I never imagined I would end up on the Multicultural Hall of Fame wall. It's because I didn't dream big enough. And I always tell Native students, just dream bigger.
Previous inductees into Stanford's Multicultural Hall of Fame include former Heisman Trophy winner Jim Plunkett and U.S. Senator Cory Booker, among others. The MacArthur Foundation has announced its new class of fellows. Nicknamed the Genius Grant, it comes with an $800,000 prize. Sicangu Lakota artist Diane Whitehawk spoke recently with ICT's Shirley Snavy and Jovan Wagner. Her work aims to illuminate the enduring strength, presence, and influence of Indigenous artistic practices within modern and contemporary art. Take a look.
I draw from the history of Lakota art forms, so from the history of porcupine quill work, parfleche painting, beadwork, regalia making, all the practices that come from directly from our communities, which are historically practices of abstraction, and they're the original practices of abstraction on this continent. And I draw first and foremost from that rich history. And I also have been educated within and am a participant within the art world, within a studio practice, making works that are intended to be hung in and displayed within museums and galleries. And so I have studied the trajectory of Western Euro and Euro-American painting and abstraction as well. And so my work draws from those histories, but from the intersections of those histories, as it really reflects the makeup of my life and my life experiences, and the way that I have navigated spaces where, I've been taught predominantly by Native people within, tribal colleges or informal forms of education within our communities. And I've also grew up in the city and have gone to mainstream education and grad school within mainstream academia. And so my practice really is a natural reflection of all of these forms of education and life experiences.
So when you talk about that, you're talking about the tradition of family and what you learn from your family. And for art historians, those who don't know about art history, they would take a look at your work and say, oh, wow, that's really contemporary. But indeed, it's not. Because back in the old days, the Lakota women did the abstract designs, the geometric designs, and the men painted little pictures on the teepees.
That's a huge part of what I am addressing within the mainstream art world, is that the way that our art history is told, the way that we tell those stories currently in academia, in museums, and institutions, is a completely European and European American centric narrative that positions the invention of abstraction within European men and European American male painters. But and so their practice of abstraction, which is a beautiful practice of abstraction, but it is one practice of the human practice of abstraction among global practices. And our relatives, our female relatives, were painting abstractly on stretched hide on this continent before folks were here painting abstractly on stretched canvas. And so speaking about those, creating works that allow me to present conversations like that within mainstream art spaces is what I hope to be my contribution to us really critically thinking about how we're telling our stories and moving towards models where we're telling our stories more honestly. If we tell the story of this land base honestly, we have much better chances for learning empathy for one another, for practicing compassion, and for moving towards healthier models of cohabitation, because that's what's happening now. We have to learn to respect each other's histories, our contributions to these shared histories, and the fact that they are 100% intertwined histories. That you can't pull them apart. The way that and a lot of those artists, the European and European American male artists, were looking at the work of our ancestors for inspiration because it was strong work, because it was inspirational work, because it was worthy of being looked at and thought about and considered in another artistic practice.
We have that ownership as Lakota people of our stories and our family and our past, and you incorporate that so well in your work, and I just really appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
What are you working on now? What's next?
Oh, we got a lot of stuff in happening in the studio right now. I have a solo exhibition that's opening at Various Small Fires Gallery in LA on November 18th. And so I have until Friday to finish the last couple paintings for that exhibit. And then there's a video installation as well titled Listen, which is a work that focuses on Indigenous language and asks its audience to consider how many languages they can identify by sound, and then think through what those languages are. And for the majority of the American public, the vast majority of those languages that they're going to be able to identify just by sound are going to be languages that aren't from this continent. I can identify Italian, I can identify French, I can identify Spanish, I can identify German, I can identify Japanese, I can identify, we can identify these languages by sound, even if we don't know a single word. But then it asks people to conversely consider how many languages from this continent they could identify by sound if they heard it spoken next to them. And for a lot of the American public, it's going to be none. And then to think about how profound it is that they might not be able to identify a single language from this land base just by sound. And so each of the videos features female language speakers, and the videos are filmed on their homelands, and they speak for 5 to 6 minutes. So you can stand in front of each monitor and simply be introduced to the sounds and cadences of a small handful of our languages.
Deanne Whitehawk, thank you very much for joining us. MacArthur Fellowship this year. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to meet you.
Whitehawk's work has been exhibited across the country, including at the Whitney Museum of American Art.
Hi, I'm Beth Livingston, and I work for the Water Sense program here at EPA, and I'm the brand manager. If you believe it or not, an average American family uses about 400 gallons of water a day. Your outdoor water use could be pretty high as well, especially if you're in hot, arid climates, or again, nationwide. We know that during the summertime, our water use increases outdoors. The Water Sense program is a partnership program created by the United States Environmental Protection Agency. We're here to make it easy for Americans to save water. We make specifications for products so that it's easy to identify what products to buy that are water efficient. Pick the right plant. Pick drought-tolerant or low water-using plants. These landscapes can be quite beautiful. Also, I would let your grass grow a little bit long. Let it go brown. It's okay in the summertime to let it do that. Save a little bit of water. So if you want to find out how to save water now, you can go to our website at epa.gov/watersense to find out what you can do today.
Turning our attention northward now, we check in on what was a very busy week. There were conferences, there were hearings, there was a visit from the Secretary of the Interior, and then there was a totem pole raising. ICT's Jocelyn Estes was there. Jocelyn, it's been quite a week.
So, Aaliyah, this was an incredible week. It started off with Dolores Churchill at the Elders and Youth Conference. And she's 93, just about to turn 94 years old. She's one of the remaining elders who grew up speaking Haida as her first language, and she's a renowned basket weaver. She was a keynote speaker. She talked about the importance of love, kindness, and respect in healing. The theme of the conference was healing, which could have been the theme for the entire week because there was so much focus on it. Then they heard from activist and model Quanah Chasing Horse. She focused on being connected to your community and cultural traditions as another way to heal. Almost a year ago, La Quene, Liz Medicine Crow, said she was leaving First Alaskans Institute, which hosts elders and youth. She formally announced her resignation, which was an emotional moment. Then came the Alaska Federation of Natives Convention, which started on Thursday, and subsistence was the focus of AFN. I don't know, I mean, thousands of people attend AFN, and probably 100 or at least dozens of people talked about the importance of subsistence. So the federal government has sued the state over fisheries on the Kuskokwim River, and delegates took it one step further and said this issue has got to be resolved. And they said, let's seek a congressional remedy. And so that happened on Saturday at the Alaska Federation of Natives. And then, as if we hadn't had such a big week already, Secretary of Interior Deb Haaland held a hearing on boarding schools. And this was Anchorage is the 10th stop on what they're calling the Road to Healing, where they've asked boarding school survivors and their descendants to share their experiences as a way to heal, but also as part of an oral history project. So at the hearing, we heard from Jim LaBelle and Fred John and Robin Sherry. All three of them had gone to Wrangell Institute in Southeast Alaska, which has become notorious for the terrible, almost horrifying punishment that they dealt out to these young children who were sometimes as young as 6. And there were beatings. There were kids who had to run a gauntlet naked while they were being beat by other kids. Water hoses were turned on them. I mean, the experience started with them coming in and having everything they had, their clothing, even beautiful parkas, any food their parents had sent with them. All that was taken away from them, and their heads were shaved. It was very traumatizing. And those 3 people talked about their experiences at Wrangell Institute. And we heard from several other people who went to Eklutna and other boarding schools in Alaska. And so that happened on Sunday, and it was followed by a totem pole raising. So try to imagine something that weighs a ton and is lifted with ropes by people pulling it into an upright position. And that's what happened on Sunday with a beautiful totem pole on boarding. It's called a boarding school healing totem pole. It was carved by Joe and TJ Young, 2 Haida men from Heidelberg in Southeast Alaska. So and hundreds of people showed up for the totem pole raising, which included a potlatch. So I can hardly communicate the excitement that we had all week long. And now I think everybody's just relaxing and collapsing back in a kind of exhaustion, a high exhaustion from all the socializing and the wonderful words that they heard all week long.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.